Success isn't about luck. It's not about being born into the right family. It's not about talent, even though talent helps. The real reason most people never reach the success they dream of isn't because they lack ability. It's because they are chained by invisible patterns they don't even realize are running their lives. We live in a world that glorifies hustle, grind, and strategy. But strategy isn't the problem. The truth is, you already know what to do. Deep down, you know the habits, the work, the choices required. The question is, why don't you do it consistently? Why do you start strong, then fall back? Why do you sabotage your own breakthroughs? Because the real barrier isn't the outside world. It's the patterns you've accepted inside yourself. Today, I want to share with you 3 truths about why you're really not successful and how to break free from what's been holding you back. Dreams are powerful. They ignite excitement, stir imagination, and give us something to hold on to when life gets heavy. But here's the truth. Dreams alone don't change anything. You can sit around all day visualizing your dream house, your dream career, your dream body. But unless you align your standards with those dreams, they remain pictures in your head. Your life is not a reflection of what you wish for. It's a reflection of what you demand of yourself. Think about it. Every person wants to be happy. Every person wants to feel fulfilled. Every person would love to have financial freedom, deep love, vibrant health, and a life of contribution. But not every person has it. Why? Because people don't live at the level of their potential. They live at the level of their standards. It's what you're willing to tolerate that defines where you land. If you tolerate being broke, you'll stay broke. If you tolerate mediocrity in your relationships, that's what you'll experience. If you tolerate being tired, overweight, or unhealthy, that's exactly where you'll remain. Your standards are like an invisible thermostat. They regulate the temperature of your life. You might want a life at 90 degrees of passion, excitement, and success, but if your standard is set at 65, you'll always find a way to cool things back down when life starts heating up. You'll procrastinate, self-sabotage, or get too busy, and you'll justify it because that's the level you've conditioned yourself to live at until you raise the thermostat. Until you decide you're done living at 65, you'll never sustain that higher level. Now, how do you raise your standards? It starts with identity. Your standards are tied directly to who you believe you are. If you believe you're the type of person who always struggles, you'll find a way to struggle no matter how many opportunities come your way. If you believe you're the type of person who makes things happen, you'll fight through every obstacle until you find a way. The shift happens when you decide to stop accepting an identity that limits you. One of the biggest lies people tell themselves is, someday I'll raise my standards. But someday is not a day on the calendar. Waiting for the perfect moment to change is just another way of avoiding the discomfort of growth. The perfect time never comes. The truth is, your standards shift in a single moment. When you finally decide enough is enough. When the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change, that's when you elevate. Imagine someone who's been smoking for years. They try to quit a dozen times but always go back. Then one day, maybe their child looks at them with fear in their eyes, or a doctor delivers a harsh truth, and suddenly they quit cold turkey. What changed? It wasn't their ability, it wasn't new information, it was a shift in their standard, what they were willing to tolerate. That moment of clarity became the pivot point for transformation. Standards aren't goals. This is critical. A goal says, I'd like to lose 20 pounds. A standard says, I do not tolerate living in a body that makes me feel weak or unhealthy. A goal says, I'd like to make more money. A standard says, I refuse to settle for financial stress as my normal. The difference is urgency. Standards are non-negotiable. They're the rules of the game you refuse to break. When you set a standard, you cut off all other possibilities except the outcome you demand. But here's the catch. Most people set standards for the wrong things. They hold themselves to high standards at work but low standards in their health, or high standards in their fitness but low standards in their relationships. True transformation requires you to raise your standards across the board. Because life is interconnected, you can't neglect your health and expect to have the energy for success in business. You can't neglect your relationships and expect to feel fulfilled when you come home at night. Every area affects the others. Let me tell you something powerful. Raising your standards doesn't mean it gets easier. It actually gets harder in the short term, because the moment you raise your standards, life will test you. The moment you say, "I demand more," obstacles will show up, not to punish you, but to prove to you that you're serious. The universe, life, God, whatever you call it, will not hand you a new standard until you prove you're willing to back it up with consistent action. And that's where most people break down. They think the decision is enough, but the decision is only the beginning. Consistency is the bridge between standards and results. Anyone can commit for a day. Anyone can show up with energy when it's new and exciting, but what happens when it's boring? What happens when it's inconvenient? That's when your true standards are revealed. Your standard isn't what you say you want, it's what you repeatedly do when it's no longer fun. So let me challenge you right now. What's the area of your life where you've been setting goals instead of standards? Where have you been saying, "I'd like to," instead of "I must"? Where have you been tolerating less than you deserve? Because until you answer those questions honestly, you'll stay trapped in a cycle of wanting without doing. Raising your standards is uncomfortable, but it's the discomfort that forges strength. When you set a higher standard, you force yourself to grow into someone new. You force yourself to develop habits, skills, and mindsets you never needed before. And in that process, you discover a power inside you that was always there, but dormant because your standards never demanded it. There's a version of you right now living inside your potential. A version of you that demands more, that refuses to accept mediocrity, that won't tolerate excuses. The only way you'll ever meet that version is by demanding more of yourself right now. Not tomorrow, not someday, now, because the life you want isn't waiting on your dreams. It's waiting on your standards. Every single action you take is guided by patterns you've practiced so many times that they've become automatic. You don't even think about them anymore. You don't decide every morning to brush your teeth. You just do it. You don't decide every time you feel stressed whether you'll grab your phone, scroll, or grab a drink. It's already a programmed response. Life isn't shaped by what you do once in a while. It's shaped by the patterns you repeat daily. And the reason you're not where you want to be is because you've rehearsed the wrong patterns until they feel normal. Think about how this works. Let's say you want to build a business. You're excited. You start with fire in your belly, but then you hit an obstacle. You make a call and someone says no. In that moment, your brain doesn't think consciously about what to do. It runs the pattern you've always used when facing rejection. Maybe that pattern is retreat. Maybe it's self-doubt. Maybe it's distraction. You say to yourself, "I'll try again tomorrow." And you feel a little better, but you're reinforcing a pattern of quitting at the first pushback. And over time, that pattern kills your momentum. Most people believe they lack discipline, motivation, or clarity, but what they really lack is awareness of their patterns, because patterns run deeper than motivation. Motivation fades, but a pattern is automatic. If you want to transform your life, you don't need 100 strategies. You need to break the patterns that are stealing your future and replace them with patterns that move you forward. Here's the problem. Your brain loves efficiency. It doesn't want to waste energy thinking about every little choice, so it wires shortcuts. That's what habits are, neural shortcuts. Once your brain learns a response, it repeats it to conserve energy. That's why change feels so difficult at first. You're not just trying to do something new. You're fighting against a brain that's wired to repeat the old. And unless you intervene consciously, those old patterns will keep driving your life without your permission. But patterns aren't just behaviors, they're emotional loops. For example, maybe every time you feel stressed, you reach for food or you binge, watch or you scroll endlessly. The food, the show, or the scrolling isn't the pattern, it's the emotional loop of avoiding pain. Your brain is conditioned to avoid discomfort by finding a quick hit of relief. The pattern isn't logical, it's emotional, which means you don't break patterns with logic. You break them with a new emotional experience. Let's imagine you always run the pattern of procrastination. You wait until the last second, then you rush, then you promise yourself you'll do better next time. But the truth is, procrastination isn't about laziness, it's about fear. Fear of failing, fear of not being good enough, fear of doing the work and still falling short. So the pattern protects you from facing that fear, but it also steals your success. Until you face the root emotion, the pattern will keep running your life. The good news is this: the moment you recognize a pattern, you gain power. You can't change what you don't notice. Awareness is the first step to liberation. When you notice yourself reaching for the phone, avoiding the gym, or hesitating to speak up, you've just created an opening. That's your chance to interrupt the loop, to say, not this time. The pattern isn't you, it's something you've practiced, and what you've practiced you can unpractice. Interrupting a pattern requires energy. It requires intensity. It requires you to jolt yourself out of the automatic loop and demand something different. If you always collapse into a negative state when things get hard, you need to interrupt that state with movement, with breath, with something physical. Change your body and you change the pattern, because emotion lives in the body. You can't stay depressed while dancing. You can't stay fearful while breathing deeply and standing tall. The fastest way to break a mental loop is through a physical shift. But it's not enough to break the pattern. You must replace it, because if you don't, the brain will default back to the old loop. Imagine deleting an app on your phone but not replacing it with something new. You'd eventually download the old app again. That's how your brain works. If you don't condition a new empowering response, the old one will creep back in. So you need to decide: when stress hits, what will I practice instead? When rejection comes, how will I respond? When fear shows up, what new pattern will I fire? Repetition is the mother of skill. The same way you rehearsed the old patterns until they became automatic, you can rehearse new ones until they're just as natural. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. At first, you'll have to remind yourself constantly. But over time, the new pattern becomes effortless. And that's when you experience real freedom. Not because life got easier, but because you rewired yourself to respond differently. The truth is, everyone is running patterns. The only question is, are your patterns pulling you forward or holding you back? Successful people don't have fewer problems. They just run different patterns when problems show up. Instead of running the pattern of avoidance, they run the pattern of persistence. Instead of running the pattern of fear, they run the pattern of curiosity. Instead of running the pattern of quitting, they run the pattern of resilience. Their patterns don't eliminate challenges, they help them rise through challenges. Think about your own life right now. What's the pattern you run when things don't go your way? Do you shut down? Do you lash out? Do you retreat into comfort? Be brutally honest, because until you call out the pattern, you'll keep repeating it. But the moment you identify it, you can break it, and breaking even one destructive pattern can create a ripple effect that changes everything. Imagine what would happen if you shifted just one destructive loop in your life. Imagine replacing procrastination with immediate action. Imagine replacing fear with curiosity. Imagine replacing doubt with certainty. Just one shift in pattern could change the trajectory of your career, your health, your relationships, your life. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to break the first chain. Because once you do, you'll realize you have the power to break them all. You are not broken, you are patterned, and the patterns that once kept you safe are now keeping you stuck. But the moment you decide to stop running those loops, to interrupt them, to replace them, you step into a new identity. An identity that isn't controlled by old programs, but one that consciously chooses the direction of life. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is a signal. It's information. It's your body and your mind shouting at you that something needs attention, something needs to shift, something is demanding growth. But here's the problem. Most people spend their lives running from pain. They avoid it, suppress it, numb it, and label it as bad. And that misinterpretation is the very reason they stay stuck. Because the meaning you attach to pain will either imprison you or propel you forward. Think about it. Every great breakthrough in your life was preceded by pain. The breakup that shattered you forced you to discover your own strength. The financial struggle that drained you pushed you to learn, to hustle, to create. The health scare that terrified you made you take your body seriously. Pain was never the enemy, it was the invitation. But when you give pain the wrong meaning, when you see it as a punishment instead of a teacher, you rob yourself of its power. Most people attach the meaning pain equals suffering. And so they run. They run into distractions, into addictions, into comfort zones. But here's the paradox. The more you run from pain, the more pain you create. Skip the workout to avoid discomfort, and you end up with the pain of disease. Avoid the hard conversation to escape tension, and you end up with the pain of a broken relationship. Avoid the risk of trying, and you live with the pain of regret. The pain you avoid becomes the prison you live in. The truth is, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is what happens. Suffering is the meaning you assign to it. If you see pain as proof that you're not good enough, you suffer. If you see pain as evidence that life is against you, you suffer. But if you see pain as feedback, as a signal that you're growing, that you're stretching, that you're breaking old limits, you gain power. You start using pain as leverage instead of letting it use you. Look at athletes. They don't love pain, but they respect it. They know that the burn in their muscles isn't punishment. It's proof that they're getting stronger. They attach a meaning that empowers them. That's why they lean into pain while most people back away. It's not that athletes are wired differently. They've just conditioned themselves to interpret pain differently. And that shift in meaning is what separates those who grow from those who stay stuck. Now think about your own patterns with pain. Maybe you've faced rejection and given it the meaning, I'm unworthy. That's one meaning. But another meaning could be, I dared to put myself out there, and now I'm one step closer to finding what's right. Maybe you've failed at something and given it the meaning, I'll never succeed. But you could just as easily give it the meaning, I discovered one way that doesn't work, which means I'm closer to the way that does. The event is the same, the pain is the same, the meaning is everything. Here's the truth. Pain can be your greatest gift if you assign it the right meaning. Pain can drive you to rise higher, to dig deeper, to break limits you didn't even know you had. Some of the most extraordinary leaders, creators, and change makers in history were forged in pain. They went through loss, struggle, hardship, but instead of giving it the meaning of defeat, they gave it the meaning of purpose. They said, this happened for me, not to me. And that one shift changed everything. But let's be honest, changing the meaning of pain isn't easy, because pain feels real, it feels heavy, it demands your attention, and your brain is wired to avoid it at all costs. That's why most people don't even pause long enough to ask, what else could this mean? They just accept the first meaning their fear assigns, and fear always assigns meanings that disempower. Fear tells you pain means stop. Fear tells you pain means danger. Fear tells you pain means you're broken. But courage asks a different question. Courage asks, what if this pain is pointing me to my strength? There's a concept I want you to grasp, pain as a compass. Imagine your pain as the arrow pointing toward your greatest growth. If something hurts, it's usually because it matters. If rejection stings, it's because love matters to you. If failure crushes you, it's because success matters to you. Pain doesn't show up where you're indifferent. It shows up where you care. And if you're willing to follow it instead of run from it, you'll find the areas of your life that hold the most potential for transformation. You can't eliminate pain, but you can choose the kind of pain you live with. There's the pain of discipline or the pain of regret, the pain of sacrifice or the pain of stagnation, the pain of pushing yourself through discomfort or the pain of staying small and unfulfilled. One kind of pain builds you, the other destroys you slowly. The choice isn't whether you'll experience pain, it's which meaning you'll assign and which pain you'll choose. So many people look at discipline as suffering. Waking up early, working hard, staying consistent, it feels like pain. But the meaning changes everything. If you see discipline as deprivation, you'll hate it. If you see it as the ultimate act of self-respect, you'll crave it. The same action, the same effort, the same discomfort, but radically different results because of meaning. Ask yourself, what's the pain you've been running from that's actually the key to your breakthrough? Is it the pain of rejection, the pain of failure, the pain of starting over? What if instead of running, you faced it and gave it a new meaning? What if rejection meant redirection? What if failure meant refinement? What if starting over meant rebirth? The pain doesn't change, but your power does the moment you decide to reinterpret it. Because here's the secret, life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. That doesn't mean pain won't hurt. That doesn't mean it won't break you open sometimes, but it does mean there's a purpose hidden inside of it, a lesson, a strength, a gift, and the faster you train yourself to find that gift, the faster you turn pain from an enemy into your greatest ally.